This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrives in Beijing for a 3-day visit, stressing the need for a comprehensive and consistent approach to China. The big day is tomorrow when he meets President Xi to build what he calls pragmatic ties. North Korea's Kim Jong hails a powerful new rocket system and vows to unveil soon the next phase of Pyongyang's nuclear plans. Seoul and Tokyo call it absolutely unacceptable. And the South Korean court hands former First Lady Kim Hyung-hee a 20-month jail term for accepting bribes linked to the Unification Church. And China changes its stance on Nvidia's advanced chips, allowing the import of the H200 as it balances its AI needs against spurring domestic development. Also in the bulletin, Chinese firms on a buying spree, snapping up gold mines as bullion prices hit historic highs. What's driving the rush for gold? British Prime Minister Keir Starmer setting his sights on resetting ties and boosting trade as he arrives in Beijing for a 3-day trip. Well, the visit to China is the first by a UK premier in 8 years. Well, Mr. Starmer is due to hold talks with President Xi Jinping and Premier Li tomorrow. The British leader has vowed stability and clarity in his approach to Beijing after years of what he described as inconsistencies by previous governments.
中方呢愿以此访为契机，同英方增进政治互信，深化务实合作，共同开启中英关系健康稳定发展的新篇章，携手为世界和平安全与稳定做出应有的努力和贡献。
Relations between China and the UK sunk to new lows under the previous Conservative government. The ties deteriorated back in 2020 when former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was in office. And that's when the UK banned new Huawei equipment in 5G networks and mandated the removal of existing ones by 2027. And that same year, London suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong and imposed an arms embargo on the city after Beijing enacted the national security law. Well, tensions further deepened in January 2021 when the British government opened up visa route for eligible Hong Kong residents known as the BNO. And then in March, it imposed sanctions on Chinese officials linked to alleged human rights abuses against Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Ties were strained even further in 2022 over an incident at the Chinese consulate in Manchester, where a Hong Kong protester was dragged into the premises by unidentified men. And in 2023, the UK defined China as a long-term strategic challenge, particularly on the issue of cyber espionage. In March that year, the government banned TikTok from government devices on security grounds. Well, the tense relations began to thaw in 2024, following Mr. Starmer's appointment as Prime Minister, with the leader pledging to reassess the UK's approach to Beijing while making attempts to stabilize the fractious ties. Right, for more insights, we are joined by Ollie Barrett for CNA from London, as well as Tan Su-hui in Beijing. First to you, Ollie, walk us through some of the key items on the agenda for Mr. Starmer's visit to Beijing.
Well, Ateli, as you were saying, the key day for the visit really is Thursday with those meetings with President Xi Jinping and also with Premier Li among others. But when Keir Starmer arrives on Wednesday, we expect that he's going to be giving a briefing, a speech to the many, many business and cultural leaders that he has travelled with to really try and set the tone for this visit to them, but also internationally as well, and for a domestic audience too, because we will pick up some of his words back home here in the UK. And Keir Starmer will have a major focus on business and economy while he is in China. He really does want to burnish those ties between the UK and China in a way which will boost the domestic economy back here in the UK at a time of really sluggish economic growth. He has said repeatedly that the top priority for his government is getting this UK economy growing again. And such a huge economy like China and such huge opportunity he sees there is very much part of his domestic agenda, therefore, as well, to try and get some of that economic growth that's been so difficult to find since he's come back into office.
Right, so let's bring you in now. What about China? I mean, walk us through some of its priorities as well as concerns.
Well, China is likely going to want to reset political ties following years of distrust. You talked about the security concerns as well as human rights disputes. And earlier we heard the Foreign Affairs Ministry saying that they're hoping to enhance political mutual trust, deepen cooperation, as well as open new prospects for development. Now, the economy is also going to be a key priority. Now, the Commerce Ministry is saying that they're hoping to sign outcomes for development on trade and investment against the backdrop of increasing trade protectionism. They're saying that they're hoping that both sides continue cooperation in areas like green energy as well as healthcare. And this also comes just as China is entering its 15th five-year plan, where it sets out development goals for the economy as well as social development. And so it's going to want to secure investment with the UK, hoping to boost consumption as well as in areas like tech innovation as well as trade. But also, some are believing that the issue of Taiwan could come up. We do know that China sees Taiwan as a renegade province, and Mr. Xi had once said and had said many times that reunification is unstoppable. But again, Mr. Starmer will have to tread carefully, as we had seen earlier in June, that China had threatened to cancel trade talks when one of its officials had visited Taiwan in June. But then again, the issue of Taiwan, China sees it as an internal affair, and so it could be a sensitive issue that they may not eventually bring up. And so we will have to see.
All right, Ollie, and just picking up from what Survey was saying about these sticking points, what are the challenges stand in the way of reconciling ties with China?
Well, some of those challenges, Telly, are domestic in terms of the politics here. Labour back in office after 14 years, and that intervening period of Conservative power saw real ups and downs in the relationship with Beijing and London. And Keir Starmer, on coming into office as Prime Minister, knew that it was going to be a key challenge for him. Downing Street insists that some of those challenges we've mentioned and areas of tension between the two countries will be raised. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will raise challenging issues where interests and values differ. So we will have to see whether some of those potentially difficult conversations do throw this visit off course in any way, or whether Keir Starmer can raise them with Chinese officials while also making sure that those business ties can be burnished in the way that he would like. But with that recent decision to approve the so-called Chinese mega embassy here in London, that's really increased the domestic political pressure here in Britain. The opposition Conservatives insist Keir Starmer is getting the balance wrong when it comes to the approach with China. Keir Starmer, for his part, believes that the approach in the recent years of the Conservatives was also wrong, because he says you weren't getting the possible benefits out of the relationship that you might otherwise have been able to, while also raising areas of issue and concern. It is an incredibly difficult balance to strike. And as I say, that's why it's so controversial back here in the UK. But he will hope to come back with a large number, running into the billions of dollars worth of business deals announced during this trip.
Oh, well, we wait for that. Hui, China clearly also looking to reset ties with the UK, and this comes right after a reconciliation with Canada. So these recent diplomatic moves, what do you think they signal?
Yeah, I mean, this visit comes just as other Western leaders from France, Canada visiting China over the last 2 months, the German Chancellor possibly also visiting China next month. Analysts are saying that these U.S. allies are feeling uneasy, and these policies that they're making, they could be trying to recalibrate their policies to de-risk from the U.S., citing moves such as the tariffs as well as the Greenland issue. And China is actually keenly aware of this situation. And according to an editorial by Communist Party-linked outlet Global Times, they say that the trend of Western leaders visiting China shows that ignoring China and alienating China is not a viable option. And they said that against the backdrop of an unpredictable U.S., it says that it is a sign that Britain has finally come to its senses, citing Mr. Starmer's previous statement saying that the UK cannot be forced to choose between the U.S. or China. But again, the UK will have to tread carefully, having seen Mr. Trump threatening to impose 100% tariffs on Canadian goods after Mr. Mark Carney's visit to China. And so we will have to watch that carefully.
Well, thanks for helping us unpack China-UK relations. Ollie Barrett for CNA from London and Tan Si-hui in Beijing. Now, in other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says that he will soon unveil plans to boost the country's nuclear program after fresh weapon tests yesterday that drew regional condemnation. State media KCNA says those plans will be announced at a landmark meeting of the ruling Workers' Party, the first Congress in 5 years. The gathering that's expected to start next month is often used to set out new political and economic priorities. The North Korean leader directed yesterday's ballistic missile test in the presence of senior officials and his daughter. 4 rockets were fired, hitting a target in waters more than 350 kilometers away. It was the North's second weapons test this month. Seoul has condemned the launches, calling them a provocative act in violation of UN Security Council resolutions and urging Pyongyang to immediately cease provocations. Well, Japan echoes the sentiment today, calling North Korea's nuclear and missile programs unacceptable.
今般の弾道ミサイルの発射を含め、北朝鮮による核・ミサイル開発は、我が国及び国際社会の平和と安全を脅かすものであり、断じて容認できないものでございます。また、このような弾道ミサイルの発射は関連する国連安保理決議に違反し、国民の安全に関わる重大な問題であるとも認識しています。
Now, time now for a short break. But coming up next on East Asia tonight, why China is making a U-turn on importing Nvidia's second most powerful AI chip. Plus, more gold mines bought over by Chinese firms. What's behind the buying frenzy? Well, we'll be asking an expert. Hello there, you're watching East Asia tonight, and it is now time for your business update with Henry Yin. So, Henry, China finally giving the green light to Nvidia's advanced chips. What's that all about?
Well, that's right, Otelli. And China has reportedly approved the first batch of Nvidia's H200 AI chips for import. This marks a long-awaited shift in Beijing's position. Just 2 weeks ago, remember, customs authorities did not permit the H200 into the country. Reuters, citing sources, says the approval covers more than 400,000 H200 chips and was granted during Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang's visit to China this week. The chips have been allocated to 3 major Chinese internet firms, though no names were disclosed. Other companies are said to be awaiting approval. Nvidia's H200, its second most powerful AI chip, has become a key flashpoint in U.S.-China relations. Despite strong demand from Chinese firms and U.S. export clearance, Beijing appeared reluctant to bring them in as it seeks to reduce reliance on U.S. technology. Experts say the latest move signals Beijing's intent to support Chinese tech giants racing to build AI capacity to rival U.S. players like OpenAI. Greater China markets closed higher after a volatile trading session, with gold, oil and gas shares shoring up sentiment. Shanghai Composite Index closing today's trading session up by 0.3%. Washington Poland Index up only marginally. In Hong Kong, the benchmark Sing Index up by 2.6%. Tech and financial shares led gains after China's central bank pledged to promote greater market connectivity between the mainland and Hong Kong. China continuing its push into the global gold market as the price of the precious metal soars. CMOC, one of China's largest mining companies, says it has acquired 3 gold mines in Brazil in a deal worth $1 billion. This follows Zijin's purchase of Canadian miner Allied Gold in an all-cash $4 billion deal. Allied Gold owns mines in Mali and Ivory Coast and a project in Ethiopia. The moves come as gold prices are topping $5,000 per ounce, with investors making a flight to safe assets amid rising economic and geopolitical uncertainty. Now, to help us understand China's push into the global gold market, let's bring in Qi Wang, Chief Investment Officer of Wealth Management at UOB Kay Hian. So, Qi, gold has been on a relentless rally amid rising geopolitical tensions. So, how does this acquisition fit into China's broader strategy of securing critical resources and diversifying away from the US dollar?
Thank you. Yes, definitely this story is part of a bigger puzzle by China try to de-risk or decouple from the US in many ways. So when it comes to China's initiatives, really about how to mitigate or reduce the reliance on the US in terms of trade, in terms of technology, you mentioned Nvidia earlier, and most importantly now, finance. So gold today is a key beneficiary of so-called de-dollarization and is also a critical precious metal for China as a way to reduce its reliance on the US dollar as part of its foreign currency reserve. So gold is special because gold is not just a metal, but it also has this reserve currency status. And over the last decade, we saw gold as a percentage of global reserve system, it doubled from something like 4 to 5% to 9% at the end of 2025. So this is definitely a very important change, and this fits into what I call de-dollarization, also how China's tried to decouple from the US.
Well, apart from rising value in gold, China has also seen what happened to Russia's reserves, right? So help us understand how acquiring gold mines will help hedge against sanctions, possible sanctions, and other forms of control by the West.
Well, first of all, gold is a currency, but it's a currency not controlled by any central bank. You can think of gold as something in the neutral territory. I don't know much about the sanction risk, but I do believe for China to raise the importance or status of RMB globally, the country needs gold as a backing. I don't think we'll go back to a 1-to-1 backing, but I think having sufficient gold as its reserve will increase the confidence, the global confidence in RMB and the confidence in the country's currency, et cetera. So at least in that sense, has strategic meaning for RMB to emerge as a global currency. And as today, RMB is still around just 2 to 3% of the global reserve system. And there's huge potential for RMB to become first a regional currency and then a global currency. And then to do that, I think China needs to pile up sufficient gold itself to increase the confidence in RMB, not just the US Treasury. So China is also, by buying gold to diversify its foreign reserves while trying to raise the confidence in its currency.
Well, China has also made several high-profile mine acquisitions in Latin America. So how significant are these moves, and can they meaningfully challenge US dominance in global finance and commodities influence?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I don't think China is even close to challenge the RMB is even close to challenge the US dollar dominance. So when we talk about de-dollarization, we're not talking about US dollar collapse. We're not talking about the US debt default. The role of the US in global system is declining, but declining gradually. And China is coming up, but China is also coming up slowly. So I don't expect a overnight switch. I don't even expect the RMB to challenge the US dollar. I think back to your question about what China is doing in Latin America or what China is doing with gold, the intention here is not really to challenge the US dollar. It's really trying to establish its own system first. And then the challenge one may come later. The real rivalry will come later, but in order to rival the US dollar, China needs to beef up its own currency system, its own reserve first. So we are only at the early stage of China trying to build up its confidence, the global confidence in RMB through gold, and then through diversification into Latin America. And there's also a lot of different geopolitical events happening here. Some of them may be beyond our investor understanding, where at the end of the day, we're just wealth advisors, we're not political experts. But you can clearly see that even without gold, there's increasing ties between China and Latin America, whether it's Brazil and used to be Venezuela, and then Chile, and it covers copper, covers new energy, it covers all kinds of metals, and now gold. So you can kind of see that this is really a series of changes here now at play as part of China's move to decouple from the US dollar. And the US is probably trying to do the same thing. So in that case, I think the two countries' goals are aligned. So both sides wanted to reduce reliance on each other at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Well, a quick question before we go. As China steps up efforts to safeguard resource security, how might this reshape global supply dynamics for the rest of the world?
Oh, that's also a great question. So you can expect more moves like this. So we talk about China modeling CMOC acquisition in Latin America. I think a lot of Chinese companies, not just this company, we have lithium companies, Chinese lithium companies try to make global expansions in not just Latin America. Another key country or continent to watch is Africa, also very well resource rich. I think is a place of interest for China, and also, of course, Russia. Russia supposedly has the most resources globally, whether it's oil, natural gas, and gold or metals. So you can expect more collaboration or more deals like this between China and these countries from those regions.
All right, Chi, thank you so much indeed for your analysis. Chi Wang, Chief Investment Officer of Wealth Management at UOB Kay Hian. And I'll have more later this hour on how regulators are playing catch-up on cashless payments and how Trump's tariffs are giving Southeast Asian nation an edge over China. Back to you, Telly.
All right, speak to you later. Thanks so much for now, Henry. Now, turning our attention to our next story now, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is doubling down on a campaign promise to reclaim a key port in Darwin, leased to a Chinese firm for 99 years. Well, the leader says the move is vital to Australia's interest and that his government will be bringing the port leased to Landbridge back under Australian ownership. Beijing has warned of possible trade repercussions. Its ambassador in Canberra say that a forced sale could affect Chinese investment and cooperation in Australia, and that China will take steps to protect its interests.
中方愿意重申，有关中国企业是通过市场的方式获得了达尔文港的租约，其合法权益应该受到充分保护。
Darwin Port was sold in 2015 to a Chinese firm, Landbridge, for more than $350 million, drawing criticism from the United States. Now, Landbridge is yet to comment, but it had previously stated that the port remains financially strong. Coming up in East Asia tonight, Singapore authorities say a self-radicalized 14-year-old student has been dealt with under the Internal Security Act. You're watching East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrives in Beijing, seeking to reset ties and boost trade after years of strained relations, in the first official visit by a UK premier in 8 years. North Korean leader Kim Jong says that he will unveil plans soon with regards to boosting the country's nuclear program after fresh weapon tests yesterday drew regional condemnation. And a South Korean court sentences a former First Lady Kim Kyung-hee to 20 months in jail for accepting bribes linked to the Unification Church. Now, a South Korean court has sentenced former First Lady Kim Hyun-hee to jail, finding her guilty of bribery. While the ruling deepens the legal fallout from the collapse of former President Yoon Suk-yeol's administration. CNA senior correspondent Lim Yun-suk with this report.
Prosecutors sought a 15-year prison term for former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, saying she accepted luxury gifts, including Chanel handbags and a diamond necklace, while her husband was in office. They also demanded a fine of 2.9 billion won, or about $2 million. A Seoul court sentenced her to 1 year and 8 months in prison on Wednesday after finding she accepted bribes from figures linked to South Korea's Unification Church in exchange for political favors, even though the church said the gifts were given without expectation of political favors. The court, however, cleared Kim of 2 other major charges: stock price manipulation and violations of the Political Funds Act, saying there was insufficient evidence. The judge said the position of First Lady carries no formal political authority but holds strong symbolic responsibility. The court also ordered Kim to pay a 12.8 million won fine, or nearly $9,000, and to forfeit the diamond necklace. Kim Gun-hee has consistently denied wrongdoing, and a lawyer said they were considering whether to appeal. Prosecutors, on the other hand, have confirmed they will appeal the sentence. The ruling party criticized the verdict, warning it could send a signal that South Korea tolerates abuse of power and that it undermines the rule of law. Many Koreans who followed the televised ruling shared that reaction.
최소 5년 이상은 다들 10년 이상까지도 기대를 하고 방송을 보기는 했는데 1년 8개월이 나왔다는 거는 진짜 아이들이 커가는 과정에서도 그런 거를 봤을 때 죄짓고도 이렇게밖에 형량이 안 나오네? 라고 생각할 수도 있고.
그 나라를 이 지경으로 아주 나라를 이 모양으로 대한민국 국격을 떨어뜨린 그런 부분에 대해서 형량이 굉장히 낮다고 생각해요.
The ruling now means that Kim Gun-hee and her husband, former President Yoon Suk-yeol, face prison sentences, an unprecedented situation in South Korean politics. Yoon is standing trial in multiple cases linked to his failed attempt to impose martial law in December 2024, a move that plunged the country into its worst political crisis in decades. He has already been sentenced to 5 years in prison in a separate case and has appealed that ruling. A verdict on the insurrection charge is expected next month. Lim Yun-suk, CNA, Seoul.
Health authorities across Asia are on the alert after a Nipah virus outbreak in India, even as officials there say the situation is contained. They detected 2 cases in December, tracing around 190 close contacts. All tested negative. Malaysian border officials say they're monitoring the entry of animal products from India. Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand health officials are stepping up screenings at major airports. China and Vietnam have enhanced control and prevention measures along their borders, and Myanmar has issued a health advisory for travelers heading to India's West Bengal, the origin of the outbreak. Now, fruit bats are natural carriers for the Nipah virus, and it can travel from animals to humans through contaminated food or directly to people by contact with blood, saliva, or urine. The virus has a high death range, 40 to 75%, and there is no cure. But Thai health experts say Nipah is not as infectious as COVID-19. And Chinese researchers say a drug, VV116, originally developed to treat COVID, shows promise. The studies claim VV116 increases survival rates in hamsters by reducing the viral load in vital organs. The last major Nipah outbreak in 2018 killed at least 17 people in southern Kerala state in India. Now, India's Maharashtra State Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar was killed in a plane crash this morning. 5 people were on board the private plane. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation says there are no survivors. Video shows smoke rising from the wreckage scattered across an open field. Mr. Pawar was flying to his home region from Mumbai to campaign in local elections. Flight tracking data shows the aircraft was attempting a second landing before it crashed. Mr. Pawar was the chief of the Nationalist Congress Party and a close ally of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Maharashtra has announced 3 days of state mourning. Neha Punia is covering the story for CNA, and she has more details from New Delhi.
still very much a developing story, but we do know that the civil aviation watchdog in India, the DGCA, it's confirmed that there were no survivors in that crash. We know that the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Ajit Pawar, had left Mumbai in the early hours of Wednesday at about 8 a.m. local time to go to Baramati, which is also incidentally his home district, just about a half an hour flight from Mumbai, and that's where the crash happened. Eyewitnesses have described hearing a loud explosion and then seeing huge plumes of smoke coming out of the crash site. There are pictures circulating online that show the tail of that aircraft sticking out from the crash site, and the rest of the plane completely mangled. You can see pieces of debris as locals crowd that area. Emergency responders are at the site, we're given to understand. The minister was travelling with two of his team members, including one security personnel. There was a pilot and a crew member on board. This was a Learjet 45, a chartered plane, reportedly belonging to a Delhi-based company. Some people have described seeing the plane look a bit unsteady at the time it was climbing down when it was getting ready to land. And some eyewitnesses have said that's when it reportedly went off the runway and crashed. A probe has now been ordered, and it'll look into the details of what exactly happened and why the crash happened in the first place.
Now, a 14-year-old Singaporean student has been dealt with under the Internal Security Act. He was self-radicalized online by Islamic State extremist ideologies. The Internal Security Department says the youth aspired to travel overseas to fight for ISIS and die as a martyr. Well, under a restriction order, he's barred from changing residence, traveling overseas, or accessing the internet without ISD's approval. Well, ISD says the youth's radicalization started as early as 2023 when he was just 12. He came across a video of ISIS fighting American forces in Iraq. The teen viewed ISIS as defenders of civilians. Now, as he searched for more content, social media algorithms fed him even more extremist material. Well, he found a pro-ISIS website and spent up to 9 hours a day consuming such content. He became a staunch supporter by late 2023 and pledged allegiance in June 2024. He began posting pro-ISIS material online, including videos created using gameplay from platforms like Roblox and Gorebox. The teenager would role-play as an ISIS fighter and simulate attacks and executions. ISD says he created multiple social media accounts to promote ISIS and encourage armed violence. The youth felt he was too young to physically take up arms. He aspired to travel in about 10 years' time to Syria, Afghanistan, Africa, Iraq, or Bali to fight for ISIS and die a martyr. To prepare, he carried out daily battle simulations at home for up to 2 hours, and he used a toy rifle and role-played attacks on forces he viewed as ISIS enemies. ISD says he was aware his activities were unlawful and took steps to conceal them. While some family members and schoolmates tried to dissuade him, none reported him to the authorities. ISD says this is the third 14-year-old to be dealt with under the ISA in the past 2 years. The department highlighted growing concerns about youth radicalization at younger ages. It's urging the public to seek help early if they suspect someone may be radicalized. Now, ASEAN's top diplomats will meet in Cebu this week against a backdrop of old and new challenges. The foreign ministers' retreat marks the first in a series of key ASEAN meetings for the year. On their plates, ongoing issues like the Myanmar crisis, as well as emerging concerns following Washington's unilateral military actions against Venezuela. CNA's senior correspondent Leong Wai-kit has more.
Another year, another chair. And the challenges are mounting. ASEAN is now facing profound changes in the world.
We are seeing now the rise of populism, rise of right-wing authoritarianism across many parts of the world. We are also seeing economic changes and challenges in the world.
At the start of the year, Mr. Trump took unilateral military action against Venezuela's president, arresting him on narco-terrorism charges.
The recent actions shows that we've now really moved into the law of the jungle, right? The best thing for ASEAN to do is to maintain this neutral convening ground, to be friendly and inclusive of everyone, which is in the DNA of ASEAN. Bring everyone on board, be as non-threatening to major powers as you can.
The US released its national security strategy late last year. It talked about regaining its preeminent role in the Western Hemisphere. And what does that mean for ASEAN?
And by that suggestion, they must be thinking that there would be an Eastern Hemisphere. And logically, geographically, Southeast Asia would reside in that hemisphere. So it does tell us where the US's attention will be, at least in the short term, on the remaining 2 years of President Trump's administration. So in that regard, I think it's not a bad thing. It gives Southeast Asia some breathing room to, regroup, reconsider, re-strategize, and to see what more we can do to try to mitigate these risks.
Closer to home, border clashes between Thailand and Cambodia remain a concern. The ASEAN chair also has to mitigate risks in its own backyard. Among them, the continuing tensions in the South China Sea.
Manila is concerned that China could actually occupy actual Philippines territory on the Luzon Strait. The reason is because if the Chinese Navy need to successfully and safely move out from the South China Sea into the Western Pacific, they need to secure the Luzon Strait to make sure that the Americans and the Philippines could not conduct missile attacks on Chinese warships.
And this is why ASEAN, led by Manila, is pushing for progress with Beijing on a code of conduct on the South China Sea.
The Philippines will also have to deal with the crisis in Myanmar, which in December kicked off a three-phase election. Despite the polls, the bloc's stance is that Myanmar must implement an agreed peace plan known as the 5-point consensus. Only non-political representatives can attend ASEAN meetings. And Myanmar won't chair ASEAN until the bloc decides otherwise. But one key question is, how will ASEAN navigate ties and engagements with a post-election Myanmar? A Myanmar which, on paper, has moved from being under military rule to, in the words of the military, a democratically elected government.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, a stronger currency usually means trouble for exporters, but not these furniture makers in Malaysia. I'll tell you why after the break. You're watching East Asia tonight, and as promised, Henry Yin is back for more business news this hour. Henry?
Well, thanks, Otelli. A day after threatening South Korea with 25% tariffs, US President Donald Trump is striking a calmer tone.
Are you encouraging tariffs? No, we'll work something out. We'll work something out with South Korea.
The US leader offered no further details. Yesterday, he said he was raising duties on South Korean autos and other goods because Seoul's parliament has not approved legislation tied to a major trade deal. Under that agreement, South Korea pledged to invest $350 billion in America. In return, Washington lowered reciprocal tariffs from 25% to 15%. The announcement caught South Korean officials off guard as higher tariffs could deal a blow to its export-driven economy. South Korea's parliament is not expected to hold a full vote until February. 5 bills linked to the investment package are pending, and Seoul's industry minister is expected to travel to the U.S. soon for talks with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Washington has also expressed concern about new South Korean laws tightening oversight of digital services and online platforms. Sources familiar with the talk say recent regulatory action against U.S.-listed e-commerce firm Coupang may have factored into Mr. Trump's tariff move. Seoul has rejected that link. A check on Korean markets, Kospi rose more than 1.6%, extending yesterday's gains after the global AI boom drove stocks to a 3-week high and taking the sting off out of Washington's tariff threat. Also, the South Korean won hitting a near 3-month high on a weaker dollar. Still, it's at its lowest level since 2008 global financial crisis. Weakness in the South Korean currency is largely to blame for the delay in the planned U.S. investment. Meanwhile, South Korean chip giant SK Hynix reported its strongest quarterly results to date, lifted by the AI wave that triggered an unprecedented surge in memory demand. Operating profit more than doubled to $13.5 billion in the December quarter, comfortably beating forecasts. Once defined by sharp boom and bust cycles, the memory business is now delivering consistent profits, lifting valuations across the sector. That has helped SK hynix shares surge around 220% over the past 6 months. It's the leading supplier of high bandwidth memory of HBM for Nvidia's AI accelerators. And in Japan, official campaigning enters its second day ahead of a snap election set for next month. And checking Nikkei 225, we are seeing marginal gains, with the stocks have been under pressure on worries over the country's fiscal position after Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi pledged big tax and spending plans. The Japanese yen changing hands at 152.62 against the US dollar after Japan reaffirmed yesterday that the government would take appropriate action if needed. Traders are also on watch for a possible joint currency intervention by US and Japanese authorities. And as investors watch for that potential coordinated action on the yen, the US dollar sank to a near 4-year low yesterday. It has been under intense pressure in recent weeks from factors including Mr. Trump's policy making and concerns about central bank independence. And the US currency further extending losses after President Trump said the value of the dollar is great when asked whether he thought it had declined too much. The US leader saying he does not want to see it fall any further. The Malaysian currency has breached the psychological level of 4 ringgit against the US dollar, its strongest since 2018. But Malaysian furniture exporters remained unfazed by the stronger ringgit. As CNA's Melissa Goh reports, some exporters say US unilateral tariffs have given them an edge over their Chinese competitors.
At the Malaysia External Trade Development Corporation, the Trade Commissioner is sharing tips with exporters on how to strengthen trade with the United States, which remains one of Malaysia's top 3 export partners. This comes despite unilateral US tariffs that sent many export-driven industries into a tailspin last year. Tongsim Wood Industries, which supplies wood braces to the U.S. energy sector, said tariffs imposed by the Trump administration have given its exports an edge over Chinese products, which faces much higher tariffs of at least 25%.
China is still the biggest competitor, but I think we have a good chance in the coming years, as long as we have the advantage on the tariff to compete in the U.S. market. If you look at ASEAN countries, our tariff rate is probably one of the lowest, 19%.
He said even the ringgit's recent strength has not affected its bottom line due to Malaysia's relatively low production costs, from raw materials to labour.
So as of this year, I think we're still okay. As long as it doesn't go beyond 3.8, we are still in a good position because our labour cost is not that high compared to some part of China's region.
The company has also adopted Chinese technology to enhance environmental, social and governance compliance by recycling sawdust and plastic to produce wood composites used in sustainable building materials and furniture. While the furniture industry has welcomed the reciprocal tariff agreement for the certainty that it brings to businesses, Prime Minister Anwar's government is facing strong opposition in Parliament over the deal signed with US President Donald Trump during the ASEAN Leaders Summit last October.
Kerajaan sedang meneliti semula intipati Act bagi memastikan kepentingan ekonomi negara terpelihara. Tumpuan khusus akan diberikan kepada kesan ekspor negara kepada Amerika Syarikat yang bernilai 233.1 bilion dan kelangsungan perniagaan, perlindungan dan pekerjaan yang dianggarkan 648,000.
As businesses strive to adapt and survive in a challenging global environment, what happens next on the geopolitical front is really beyond their control, with no easing in sight to the prolonged US-China rivalries. Melissa Goh, CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
Asia is one of the most cashless parts of the world, and regulators are still catching up. Governments are tightening oversight on everything from digital wallets and cross-border transfers to crypto and online scams, trying to protect consumers without killing innovation. On the sidelines of the Asian Financial Forum in Hong Kong, CNA's Roland Lim spoke to Adam Gagan, Global Head of Government Affairs at Revolut, on where the digital payment system is headed next.
Our aim from day one has been to make it fastest and easiest to send money around the world. You can do that by sending money from a Revolut user, for example, in Japan to the US or the UK. Second kind of layer would be sending from someone who works with Revolut to another market where we operate, such as using PayNow to settle to someone in Singapore. But it's that third layer, sending to anyone around the world, that a stablecoin is going to unlock. Fast, cheap, easy, and something that people will be able to use day to day.
And many people worry about scams, about hackers. How safe are digital wallets as compared to your digital account with a bank, brick and mortar bank?
So I think banks always have that trust premium, and that's actually why as Revolut we're trying to become a bank in 100 markets, including actually in Singapore, in Hong Kong, many markets in the region. I think when it comes to actual scams and risk, though, what we see is less that someone's going to hack into your account and steal your money, but a big increase globally on what we call authorized push payment scams, APP scams. This is where someone convinces you to send money to your brother or your friend when it's in fact not them. That is a big risk whenever you start to send money quickly, but it's a massive issue that we're seeing globally, particularly from social media companies. About 70% of the scams we see is coming from online kind of pages and Instagram and social media accounts. This is something that we need to all work out together.
Hong Kong has just introduced new rules for crypto companies. Does this make it safer for the ordinary user, or is it going to make it easier for the big companies to move money around?
So I think regulation in this space definitely legitimizes actors. Again, as Revolut, we're operating as a bank, so we're really actually trying to reach the highest level of regulation and oversight. So when we're looking at products like stablecoins, we're looking at how do you give that in a way which is going to be safe and secure to individuals. So I think these changes in Hong Kong means that the market is definitely going to legitimize, it's definitely going to expand, there's going to be new entrants. I think if we're honest, it also puts Hong Kong a bit more on the map. This is a big new technology that's being adopted globally. People are now going to start looking at doing things in Hong Kong when they weren't previously.
At the same time, though, China is tightening controls on payments and on financial apps. I mean, do you think this kind of strict regulation actually helps protect people or hold the industry back?
So I think there's a lot of different approaches to embracing technology and regulation globally. As you say, China has a different view in some of these areas, but at the same time, they're massively in advance of other jurisdictions and others. So things like Alipay, QR code-based payments are so integrated into the Chinese economy. You know, when you look at places like Europe and the UK or even the US, they're still quite far behind in those areas. And so I think what we are excited to see actually is integration of these different technological approaches.
So what's coming next? I mean, next 5 years, how will users be able to spend, save, move money? What's going to be different?
So I think there's two big trends that you see taking place. First, there is a bit of fragmentation when it comes to payments. Even here, you know, if you try and pay a Hong Kong taxi today, it's hard to do, right, with an international card. Similarly, if you're in China or in India or in Brazil, there's generally a local way to pay that you can't take. As Revolut, we're trying to solve that problem. Not only are we integrating with Alipay, we're integrating with things like Pix, which is the instant payment method in Brazil, with UPI in India, with M-Pesa in Kenya. So really to try and join up those connections. The second big trend we see is obviously AI and kind of this change in how financial services will be adopted. What we're really excited to see is actually the democratization of finance. So essentially putting your bank manager in your pocket on your phone, getting advice about how to invest, manage your money, and essentially boost your savings in a better and more safe way.
I hope you've enjoyed Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can always look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.